Welcome to Science Talks with Isagenix, where different scientists, nutritionists, researchers, and experts break down the science behind Isagenix products and nutrition and health in general. My name is Taylor Malham. I'm an Isagenix nutritionist and on the product education team. And today we have one of our best and brightest here at Isagenix, Alex Moore, on the line. Alex is a research scientist here at Isagenix with a master's in kinesiology from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and is currently a PhD student at Arizona State University. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Taylor.
Yay, I am so excited to get to chat with you today. We were brainstorming what to talk about, and we both kind of landed on this brain and kind of sleep topic. So I'm really excited to dive into this with you.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well.
Okay, so let's just jump right into it. We're talking brain and sleep. So why do we need sleep and why is it important to our brain health? I mean, I think all of us listening or on the call here know what it feels like when we haven't slept, what it does to your brain, but like, why is it so important?
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we think, obviously, when we're conscious and not asleep, which is normally how we think, right? We generally think of brain and cognition as occurring during the daytime, right? But your brain is also highly active when you sleep. And sleep, for the normal individual, accounts for about 1/4 to 1/3 of our total lifespan. So our brain is constantly working, and it's constantly working in the sleep state. So we know that they're both really tied heavily together. And, you know, as a basic biological function, I kind of like to liken it to food, right? Just as your body craves food, as with hunger, so does your body crave sleep. You know, throughout the day, you'll notice if you're not overdoing coffee or some other stimulant like that, your desire for sleep builds up and it reaches a certain point where you can no longer resist it. You need to go to sleep or your body's going to basically make you fall asleep. And this is one of the dangers that that occurs with like pilots and people that drive trucks and et cetera. And they have rules and regulations around how many hours they can actually work, or sleep is actually required. So everyone knows when they don't get a good night's sleep, how they feel cognitively, mentally. You're in a fog. You're not at your best, right? So we actually know that you aren't at your best, and your brain is not functioning at its best when you're in this state. So sleep is extremely vital to proper brain functioning.
Yes, I've been hearing you talk about how important sleep is and kind of the fog. I can relate. I've been having some sleep issues lately with the whole newborn life. So I definitely know what that fog feels like. So can you kind of talk about like what happens internally while you're sleeping? Like,
Right.
Why is it so important for brain health?
Well, I think it's important to touch on that fog a little bit and what exactly that is. And I probably should have gone into a little bit more detail. But basically, you know, sleep is, you kind of want to think of it as like a waste removal process, where it's actually removing a lot of the waste products that your neurons, your cells in your brain are producing. So this is why we want to regularly get in enough sleep. And when you don't get enough sleep, I mean, this is tied to several other health risks, symptoms of, as we know, depression, things like seizures, high blood pressure, migraines. All these things worsen when we aren't providing that removal process to occur. Even your immunity, which is a very hot topic right now, of course. So overall, sleep plays a very important role in metabolism. Now, what happens during sleep? We can kind of break it down into 4 simple phases. The first phase is when you're kind of very generally when you're just like that transition period from where you're in a resting state and you start to fall into sleep. Now you're still kind of in a conscious state here, but you start to drift into an unconscious state. And the second stage is that light light sleep stage. From there, we get into the really restful sleep, the deep sleep. And here your body can actually start to dream. We all know what that experience is like, but where we get the most vivid dreams occurs in the fourth phase, which is called REM, rapid eye movement. You can actually see this if you watch someone that is sleeping. Their eyes are closed, obviously, but you can actually see their eyelids kind of flicker or flutter as their eyes rapidly move underneath their eyelids. And an interesting fact about this stage, your body actually goes into a form of paralysis where you can't actually move. And I've actually personally experienced this where I start to become conscious, but I'm still in that quasi-paralyzed state where I feel really strange. But basically that's a protective mechanism so you don't act out your dreams and actually hurt yourself. Your body actually has that as a safeguard, luckily, so you don't hurt yourself. But this process, roughly the 4 phases, occurs in about a 90-minute time window. That there is some variation there, but that's kind of like the average. So that's why you'll notice, like if you don't hit if you have like your alarm set as a specific time and you don't get through a full cycle, you really don't feel fully rested. So it's probably best to make sure in an ideal world that you wake up rested and that you complete one of these subsequent cycles. You may go through 3, maybe if you're getting some better sleep, 4 or 5 per night. And this 90-minute cycle is actually very interesting because we can break up, we'll talk about the circadian cycle in a second, but we can break up our day kind of into these 90-minute cycles. And there's a lot of research in this area now, and it's called ultradian cycles, which, there's some argument now that maybe it's best to kind of work in 90-minute time blocks because your brain can work more efficiently there. And, if like you work for 90 minutes and then switch to another task or something. I don't know about you, but I kind of seem to work on that, where I have difficulty lasting much more than an hour and a half to 2 hours on any particular thing.
No, I love that. I've never heard that before. And that makes perfect sense. I always love hearing the science behind things that are just kind of that we kind of do naturally without knowing why. But one thing that I love that you said, Alex, was talking about sleep kind of as like a waste removal process. I always hear Dr. Michael Colgan talk about sleep kind of as like a reset. And so it was just interesting kind of how those two anecdotes, is that the right word, kind of come together to really illustrate what's happening and why sleep is so important. Because I think we always all hear like, oh, you need to get good sleep, but actually knowing like what's going on, why the process is so important, and why you wake up feeling so rested or not is so interesting. So let's kind of talk about that circadian rhythm or circadian cycle that you mentioned. It's really, you can't really talk about sleep, proper sleep, brain health without kind of talking about that natural cycle. So will you kind of explain that to our listeners who don't know what it is?
Sure. So actually, I would argue that the circadian rhythm is important to almost everything that we do, all of our health metrics. And basically, this is just describing the kind of internal process that we have developed as humans in response to daylight and nighttime, this kind of 24-hour process. So we actually have developed some biology to basically entrain this in us. And it's in our brain, and the structure is known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is a distinct group of cells located in a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. And basically the structure receives information via light through the eyes. We all know that our eyes have these special rods and cones that help us envision, right? But there's also within the retina these specialized cells that project light directly onto the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And it actually helps synchronize our bodies to this kind of clock, this master circadian clock. So you'll notice generally when it gets darker out, barring that you're not exposing yourself to a lot of bright lights and stuff like that, you'll feel tired. Conversely, when you wake up and the sun is bright outside, you're going to feel more awake. That's that part in your brain actually firing and working, which is really, really cool. And just like light, heat can also activate some of these processes. You'll notice your internal body temperature actually starts to cool as you go into night, which is very important to help put you to sleep. And when you wake up, your body should be warming up and you should be getting some more body heat throughout the day. So the circadian rhythm regulates obviously your body temperature. It regulates brain activity. It regulates hormone production. It regulates cell regeneration and tons of other biological processes. Actually, you have specific genes in your body called clock genes, and they're present in almost every single cell in your body. So it just shows you how important the circadian rhythm is to our overall health. For instance, when they had their genes deleted, these clock genes, they massively overate, they became obese, and they became diabetic. So basically, it was just really, really bad for their health.
Oh, geez, I've never seen that study, but that's wild. So that leads me to ask the question, obviously this is an animal study, but we have science. We understand that the circadian cycle, their circadian rhythm, those clusters of cells that you're talking about have an impact on humans' well-beings as well. So can you kind of talk about how the circadian cycle, sleep and brain health kind of impacts health, weight, all of that?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the biggest things that people are concerned about is maintaining a healthy body weight. We know that's very, very important for overall health. And it's kind of a question in the science and in the lay public, whether poor sleep leads to, getting a higher weight, or does a higher weight cause poor sleep? What's the deal here? So based on large population studies, it appears that poor sleep quality more strongly influences gaining body weight or having a higher BMI, not as strongly in terms of the other way. So there's no like one cause. It's usually on an individual basis. There's no one cause for poor sleep. It could be partly a hormonal issue. It could be poor eating and exercise habits. Irregular work hours can massively affect this, and even genetics to some extent. But what we do know is there's several things that you can do to improve your sleep hygiene, and also do things throughout the day when you're awake to set you up for a really good sleep at night.
Yeah. Will you kind of will you share those?
Yeah. I mean, some of them are pretty common. I mean, they're pretty common sense stuff, like obviously go to sleep when you're tired, right? I mean, that makes sense. Pay attention to your so-called sleep environment. Your bed should be comfortable, obviously. Your room should be dark and quiet. You shouldn't have a TV, and everyone is guilty of this, but you really shouldn't have your cell phone in your room. You want to get rid of any source of light. You want to make sure that the temperature is cool. Really just keep your bedroom for sleeping, nothing else really, right? Don't have a bunch of other, like your office, don't have your office or your computer in there, because it's just not going to set you up for the most optimal sleep scenario. Another important one would be avoiding naps. I mean, if you're having naps that are maybe less than 20 or 30 minutes, that might be all right. But you really kind of want to avoid napping behavior. Stimulants, everyone's going to handle stimulants differently. Some people can drink coffee, closer to bed and be fine. Others not. Just, know your body, be responsible there. I think one of the big ones, though, is trying to be consistent. Training your body to go to bed at a somewhat similar time, waking up early, waking up at a similar time in the morning. These kind of things can be very important. Obviously, exercise daily if possible. And one that a lot of people don't do enough, particularly now that we all live in these particular times, is not getting outside enough. Sun exposure you just can't beat it. I mean, you can do certain types of lighting, certain types of blue lighting to get that exposure to that brain structure that I mentioned previously, but nothing beats sunlight. Like if I could recommend anything, like wake up, ideally go for like a walk or a jog or a run or a bike ride outside without sunglasses and get like your eyes some light exposure. That is early in the day. That would help you tremendously in getting a good night's sleep and setting up your circadian rhythm properly. Another thing I think that people do that isn't the best is wearing blue light filter glasses all the time. I understand that, we're glued to our computers now, but earlier in the day, we actually want to get blue light exposure because that actually awakens us. And this ties into something that hopefully we'll have some time to talk about, which is the hormone called melatonin.
Wow, that's really interesting. I love that you mentioned the sunlight and the sun exposure because that's something that we can all do and we all really should do. Like going on a morning walk, I have personally experienced like how much that just completely changes my day. But before we move on to melatonin and that, something I want to just throw at you, Alex, is when we talk about sleep, I always kind of get the pushback, like I don't have time. So can you kind of talk about like quality versus quantity of sleep? Like if you can't get 10 hours a night, does the quality matter? Like does making sure that the hours you do get are quality, is that something we can do to kind of, enhance our sleep hygiene without, creating more hours in the day?
Sure, absolutely. Sleep quality is paramount. And there's many ways to define sleep quality. Obviously, one that people most often think about is the time that it actually takes to fall asleep. Like just because you're in bed doesn't mean you're sleeping, right? So it's kind of a wasted effort. So the time that it takes, like if you're really tired, you notice like as soon as your head hits the pillow, you're asleep. For most people, they would consider that quality sleep. So that's a good sign. If you have that going for you, that's a great sign. Sleep duration, there's wearable devices. Your cell phone can obviously give you some of that feedback now. These are okay as a rough approximation. They basically just kind of measure body movement. If you're noticing that you're moving around, your body's moving around a lot, that usually is not a great sign you're having restless sleep. You can also have a heart rate monitor, and it can look at your heart rate variability, which is actually another great marker if you're into collecting data. A lot of wearable devices gather that data now, so you can actually use those. And then the other obvious one is just how you're functioning the next day after a crap sleep. It's, when you have a good sleep, and for people that don't generally get good sleep, like that it's amazing how good it feels. So just imagine like having that every single day. I mean, your brain would be operating on all cylinders. So yeah, really strive for sleep quality. Like I said, I kind of gauge it. The main metric I use is how fast I'm falling asleep and how good do I feel the next day.
So I am somebody who I have never like laid down in bed and fallen asleep. Like I struggle falling asleep. And so that's kind of something that's like always hampered me. But the only thing that I found that's really helped is melatonin, using like a melatonin supplement. So this has just been so helpful for me. So will you kind of talk about melatonin, what it is? Sometimes people get pushed back like, oh, I don't want to rely on melatonin, but will you kind of just speak to this and kind of how it plays a role in sleep?
Yeah, melatonin, people don't realize it's actually a master hormone in your body. And that structure that we were talking about previously in the hypothalamus, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that group of cells that takes light information, it relays that and passes it on to the pineal gland, another structure in your brain. It actually looks like a little pine cone. It releases the hormone melatonin. And everything kind of in the human body works in a cycle. And when you look at the course of 24 hours with melatonin production, it kind of peaks at night and is one of the main mechanisms for putting you to sleep. That's why when you take melatonin as a supplement, it's usually pretty effective at putting you to sleep. but it also regulates other things in your body. It helps with our physiology in many ways, including energy, hormone release, brain growth, muscle growth, body fat to an extent. So it's actually a very important hormone in our body. And, if you are having issues sleeping, you can take this, but I would recommend that you take it from a reputable source, because melatonin is dosed generally in milligrams. And I've read some recent reports, laboratory reports, looking at various different companies that were selling this and what they were reporting and what was actually in the product. And you get a range, but some companies had almost non-existent levels of melatonin. Others had over 100 to 200 fold, which is not good either. So you want to make sure, if you are going to take melatonin, make sure that you're getting it from a reputable source. You're taking a responsible amount. And one effective way to take it actually seems to be in a like a sublingual form. So I think we have the sleep spray, for instance. So you can spray that right underneath your tongue. It's bioavailable and of high quality, and it works pretty well. So, I'm not saying you have to take that necessarily, but something like that would be a good choice.
No, I love that product. It's like my all-time favorite. It's my desert island product. Like if I had to choose one, I love that one because it doesn't make me feel drowsy. It's just the perfect thing to help me fall asleep. And I swear it enhances the quality of my sleep too, like helping me stay asleep. So yeah, I love that product. But Alex, one last question for you. What about using melatonin regularly? It's non-habit forming. Will you kind of just speak to that concern of supplementing with melatonin regularly?
Yeah, it's okay to use melatonin regularly. As all things, I wouldn't try to rely on it. The other things that we talked about in terms of developing good sleep hygiene and trying to promote restful sleep, like those should be first. It's at the end of the day, it is a dietary supplement. You're supplementing, right? So, but other than that, yeah, it's fine. Just be trying to improve your daily and your night hygiene, because as I said before, not just what you're doing at nighttime, it's also what you're doing in the daytime, and other things that you can do for your health, eating a good diet, of course, being hydrated, exercising. All these things are going to play a big role in helping you get good quality sleep. It's like a continual cycle. You always got to set yourself up for the next night and the next day. You always got to think ahead and be very mindful of your health.
So my biggest tips that I took away from kind of what you said today was, trying to make part of your routine, getting outside in the morning, if you can, going for a walk, exposing yourself to sun. That's a big one, kind of setting that circadian rhythm off on the right foot, I guess you could say. Consistency, kind of trying to be consistent about when you go to bed and when you wake up. And then all the different things you talked about with light, and really trying to improve the quality of your sleep as well. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I want to touch back on that 90-minute cycle I was talking about before. So I kind of been a little bit more mindful of this lately. I'll work for around an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then I'll get up and I'll actually walk for I have the luxury of working from home sometimes. So I'll get up and I'll walk 5 to 10 minutes. And I'll do it outside if I can. It's a great reset. And I come back to work or whatever I'm doing, and I feel so much better and so much more refreshed. I think that our brain works in this cycle, and if we kind of work to that benefit, it's your day-to-day is going to feel like a lot less of a grind. Basically, that's what I've noticed anyway.
Totally. And it makes you feel more productive too. Like there's nothing worse than just like staring at a project and just kind of hitting a wall, but getting up, moving, taking a walk, that's like the best advice ever.
Simple, but it works pretty well. So
love it. Well, thank you so much, Alex. We got to have you on again to talk more about all of this. But thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening.
Product statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. If you are pregnant, nursing, diabetic, on medication, have a medical condition, or on a weight control program, consult your physician before using Isagenix products or making any other dietary changes. Discontinue if adverse event occurs.